It is a pact between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary to confront femicide in Brazil, trying to call men to responsibility because they are the ones who are violent. So what we want to create is the idea that the problem of violence against women is not a problem of women. It is a problem of men. And we have tried to guide, whether it is a bishop of the Catholic Church, a union leader, a pastor, or anyone from social movements who wants to participate in this pact, to speak about femicide every day to see if we can bring peace of mind to women and girls in today's world. That is why we created the digital ECA, which is something very well done by Brazilian society. Civil society has an extraordinary participation. And we are going to be increasingly tougher, because if the state does not act, we cannot control the so-called digital platforms, which have nothing social about them. Very little social and a lot of hatred, a lot of promiscuity, a lot of sex and a lot of gambling, and very little that is actually social. I brought a written speech about my experience in Brazil, but I think this meeting has been so rich that I needed to clarify two things. First, that we are not here trying to create an international. We have already had 5 internationals that did not solve our problems. And secondly, I am not here to discuss democracy in my country. Democracy in each of our countries is our responsibility, the cultural responsibility of our people. We will figure it out, and the people of each country will find their own way of practicing democracy. But what strongly drives us is the issue of multilateralism and relations between nations. That is what concerns me, because this issue we are discussing here could be discussed at the United Nations. And why is it not being discussed at the United Nations? Because today, the United Nations does not represent what it was created for. The 5 members of the Security Council, the permanent members, which when the Security Council was created, were meant to guarantee peace in the world after World War II, have become the lords of war. That is the concrete reality. And the UN does not have... Look, the UN that had the strength to create the State of Israel, it does not even have the strength to maintain the Palestinian state. In fact, it does not have the strength to maintain the demarcated lands that were defined by the UN itself. So the democracy we are going to discuss here, among heads of state, is whether the world will continue as it is, or whether we will try to change it. And for us to change it, we have to have a daily international discussion. No president of any country in the world, no matter how big, has the right to impose rules on other countries. None. And the 5 members of the UN Security Council must come together to change their behavior. We cannot wake up every morning and go to sleep every night with the Twitter of a president threatening the world, making war. In other words, all of them make decisions without consulting the UN, of which they are members and part of the council. Who did Bush ask before invading Iraq? No one. Where are the chemical weapons that were in Iraq? There were none. Who did France and England ask before invading Libya? No one. What harm had Gaddafi done at that time? None. Who did Putin ask before invading Ukraine? No one. Who did Trump ask before invading Iran? No one. Who did Israel ask before invading the Gaza Strip as it did? No one. Who asked before invading Venezuela? No one. In other words, these are unilateral decisions that do not respect the form in which these people participate. And if we do not challenge this, nothing will change. Nothing will change, and the tendency is to get worse. I think this extremism, this lack of respect for the UN Charter, this lack of respect for harmony between countries and nations, is very dangerous in the world we are living in. Today we have more armed conflicts. It is the moment in history with the highest number of armed conflicts since World War II. And the UN Security Council does not meet. Its main members do not attend. It is always ambassador-level representation, and when you approve something, there is the right to veto, and it does not work because anyone can veto. And how many years have we been trying to propose changes to the number of countries participating in the UN? Where is African representation? On the African continent alone, we have 3 countries with more than 120 million inhabitants. Where is the participation of Mexico and Brazil, of Argentina, of Colombia? Where is the participation of India? So many important countries, Germany, Japan, Indonesia, all of these countries could participate. And why does it not change? When the subprime crisis happened in 2008, we created the G20. Why? To try to solve the crisis. We tried to change the IMF. We tried to change the World Bank. Nothing changed. So I think this is the democracy that we heads of state need to discuss. And we need to demand that the UN Secretary General call extraordinary meetings, even without a request from a permanent member of the Security Council. The UN cannot remain silent and watch what is happening in the world. Trump invades Iran and raises the price of beans in Brazil, raises the price of corn in Mexico, raises gasoline prices in another country. In other words, it is the poor who will pay for the irresponsibility of wars that nobody wants. This is the democratic behavior that countries must have, and we need to discuss it very seriously. The world does not need wars. We have more than 760 million people going hungry. We have millions of illiterate people. We have millions of people without electricity. We had millions of people who died because there was no vaccine against COVID-19. And these platforms, this is serious, and this must also be decided at the UN. Regulating digital platforms with democratic rules is a global issue, not an issue of one country or another. In Brazil, we are trying to do our part. Because the naked truth is that lies have defeated the truth. That is the concrete fact. In other words, to lie, you do not have to explain. To justify yourself, you have to explain, and often you cannot. So this is a challenge for us, heads of state, because we cannot imagine doing things without institutions to make them work. Otherwise, when Spain has a progressive president, Spain participates. When Brazil has a progressive president, it participates. And when it does not, it no longer participates? UNASUR, which was the most democratic thing created in South America at the beginning of this century, the most important thing, the greatest moment of social progress in South America, the greatest moment of democratic progress, ended. It ended. SELAC is ending. Because we do not have solid institutions to lead. In other words, when the president changes, the institution changes. So it is important that we learn a very serious lesson. The UN is a very valuable instrument if it works. And it needs to work to ensure that, for example, platforms are regulated worldwide, for everyone. A president of one country cannot interfere in another country's election, ask for votes for another. Where is electoral sovereignty? Where is territorial sovereignty? This is the issue we need to discuss and make ourselves heard. And where is the arena we must fight in? It is within the United Nations. It is within the United Nations. I think that is what we should try to include in the document here, Boris, a general call to discuss what is happening in the world today. With the destruction of multilateralism, will the force of the warlord prevail? That is, someone who thinks that because they have more money, because they have more technology, they can do anything. That is not possible. I am concerned about Cuba, very concerned about Cuba. Cuba has problems, but it is a problem for Cubans. It is not a problem for Lula, Claudia, or Trump. It is a problem of the Cuban people. Stop this damn blockade on Cuba and let Cubans live their lives. It is not possible that we remain silent about this. And I can tell you, comrades, that in my Brazil we have just defeated extremism. We have a former president imprisoned, sentenced to 27 years in prison. We have 4 four-star generals imprisoned because they tried to carry out a coup. But extremism has not ended. It remains alive and will contest elections again. But that is our problem. That is a problem for the Brazilian people. We deal with it with our own strength and our own tools. But the problem of the world, the problem of multilateralism, is not an internal problem of Mexico, not an internal problem of Spain. It is a problem of the United Nations. It is respect for the UN Charter. It is asking all of you who are members to read the UN Charter. Read the decision by which the Security Council was created with permanent command. Read it. And if you do not feel you are fulfilling your duty, then resign. Or let us change the UN Charter once and for all. What cannot continue is the world spending $2.7 trillion on weapons while people go hungry. What cannot continue is us talking about decarbonizing the planet while bombs are being dropped every single day in every possible country. What cannot continue is Lebanon being a victim of every war that Israel fights, where the last shot always ends up in Lebanon. Where are we going to make decisions? Where are we going to stop? Meanwhile, Claudia, look at this absurdity. While Cuba is criticized because it is a socialist country, Haiti is right next to Cuba, with people starving, gangs taking over the country, and nobody says anything about Haiti. The Haitian people also deserve respect, deserve to survive, and nobody speaks. So I think, dear Pedro Sánchez, dear comrades, my gratitude for your participation. What bothers me is the return of those who think they are the owners of the world. We do not want emperors anymore. We do not want rulers who dominate everything. Poor people deserve a chance to live in a democratic system, not just to vote, but to control their vote, to have the freedom to choose people. It is not possible. Digital networks do not allow this. And companies, platforms, unlike politicians who have identifiable owners, their owners do not appear. You do not need to know them. They do not pay taxes in our countries. So this is very serious. You have left the presidency of Chile, Boric, but you have not left the cause of democracy. We will need to find a way for you to continue in this struggle, because you are very young, you have a long time ahead, and we need to unite everyone in the world who wants to build democracy. Democracy within each country depends on each country, but democracy of the United Nations depends on all of us. Strengthening multilateralism depends on us. It depends on us believing we are as important as those who oppose us. Silence is not correct. I am astonished by the silence of people, as if they are trying to hide from something they do not want to talk about. We have to speak every day. Brazil does not want war with the United States. I do not want war with China. I do not want war with Russia. I do not want war with Uruguay. I want peace. I want my country to develop. I want my people to live well, to be able to study. That is what you all want. I do not want war with Albania. I do not want war with Bolivia. But we have to say this every day, because every day we are threatened and there is no international forum to discuss it. So I want to say to you, comrades, that I am in this struggle because individually none of us has a solution. And another important point. In Brazil, we are discussing ending the 6 days on, 1 day off work schedule because it seems that technological gains and increased productivity only benefit the rich, not the poor. These are all issues we must put on the table so that we can restore credibility to democracy. Democracy is losing credibility because often it has not delivered answers to society.